Hey guys, welcome back to more HOA Reddit Karen stories. In this Ripestories video, fake badges, HOA officers, illegal fines and a massive neighborhood scam. When an out-of-control HOA tried to enforce their ridiculous fines on my private river property, they made the biggest mistake of their lives. Let's dive right into the story. And the first one is titled, HOA Patrol Police Squad banned me from camping and fishing at my river. So I own a weird piece of property, and that weirdness is basically why this whole thing happened. So my land sits along a non-navigable stream that cuts through the back half of my place. It is not some giant river with boats and tourists, it is one of those shallow rocky streams that people call a river because it sounds nicer on a real estate flyer. In dry stretches, you can walk across parts of it in boots. In wetter months, it runs fast enough to fish. The important part is that the old deed is very clear. My parcel includes both banks through that section and the riverbed itself. That mattered a lot later. My property was there long before the subdivision next to it. The developer bought up former pasture around me, carved it into house lots, built a gate, a little stone entrance, and started selling the place as some sort of upscale nature community with private river access. And that last part should have been my first clue that trouble was coming, because the only decent river access in that area was on my land. To be clear though, I was never part of their HOA. My deed never put me under their covenants, I never signed anything, I never paid dues, and I was not some former member trying to dodge fees, I was simply outside of it. The developer knew that, I knew that, the title company knew that, but after enough new owners moved in, the HOA started acting like saying something loudly enough made it true. At first it was little stuff, a newsletter left in my mailbox that addressed me as residents, a due statement mailed to me by mistake. A friendly woman from the management company came knocking on my door, smiling like she was there to sell cookies. "We just need your contact info for the community directory," she told me. "I'm not in your community," I said. She laughed like I was joking. "But you're surrounded by it." "I'm still not in it." She looked confused and then slightly annoyed, then fake cheerful again. "Well, the board would love to speak with you about bringing your parcel into alignment." That phrase stuck with me. Bringing your parcel into alignment, like my land had wandered off and needed discipline, and I said no. A few weeks later, one of the board members came by in a golf cart and tried a different angle. "You use the front road sometimes," he said. "You benefit from our maintenance." I told him the county easement on that stretch was public and I had separate access from the back anyway. He stared at me for a second and said, "That may be your opinion." I remember actually laughing at that. I mean, a public easement is not just an opinion, and then they tried the social pressure version, a printed invite to a community unity picnic with a handwritten note at the bottom saying it would be good to discuss my membership status. I just tossed it away, and then they got pushy. They literally taped violation notices to my gate. Fire pit violation, unauthorized guest vehicle, improper exterior storage because I had a utility trailer parked near my barn, and every notice had the same problem. They all assumed I was under their rules. I called the management company once just to make sure this was not some clerical mess, and the woman on the phone sounded bored. She said, "If your property is contentious with the HOA, the board has authority to issue compliance notices for nuisance conditions that affect the neighborhood." "No," I said, "it doesn't." There was a pause, papers shuffling, and then, "Well, that is how the board interprets it." That was my second clue that these people were not just annoying. They were actually stupid in a dangerous way, and I told them again, calmly, that I was not a member and they had no authority over my land. I emailed a copy of the recorded deed language and the old survey, and I even highlighted the part showing the parcel was excluded from the later subdivision restrictions. They did what people like that always do when facts ruin their little fantasy. They ignored the facts and increased the fantasy. The board hired what they called a patrol squad. I'm not even kidding here. They had two guys in dark polos driving around in a black SUV with stickers that said HOA River Police Watch Unit. They wore badges that looked official from 10 feet away if you were half asleep. They were not real police, obviously. They were not county code officers. They were not even security for a shopping mall. They were just two middle-aged men the HOA paid to drive around slowly and act important. The first time I saw them, one stopped by my fence line while I was checking a pump. "Are you the owner here?" he asked. "Yeah." He clipped a flashlight to his belt in broad daylight, like he was in a movie. "We've heard complaints about unauthorized riverbank activity." "From who?" "The association." "You mean the people who do not own this?" He gave me a practice little nod, like he had already decided that he was dealing with a difficult person. "So I'm just letting you know community rules prohibit overnight camping and open flame use near the water." I looked at him for a second and asked, "Did they also tell you that the stream is on my deed?" He said, "That's a civil issue." That line told me everything. He didn't care what the truth was, he just wanted to sound official and go home. I said, "Then here's my civil response. Get off my property." He actually puffed up a little and said, "No need to be hostile." I pointed to the fence post with the survey tag still in it. "You're standing on my side of the line." And then he left. Not fast, but not slow either. I figured that would be the end of it. I mean, most fake authority collapses the second it meets a real boundary. Well, sadly I was wrong. The HOA president got personally involved after that. And by the way guys, if you still enjoy these HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video and post some star emojis in the comments if you want to show your support. Also by the way, I want to say a big thank you to everyone who reports these channels to me that essentially just re-upload my video and even my thumbnails and everything. I really appreciate that you guys keep an eye out for me because it's impossible for me to keep up with all these channels. The two I've caught recently are already shut down thanks to you guys. Anyway, the HOA president was one of those people who had turned board service into a full identity. Every conversation with her felt like she was auditioning to be the mayor of a country that didn't exist. She had a loud, polished voice and loved saying, "For the good of the community." Right before trying something ridiculous, she showed up one afternoon while I was stacking firewood. She said, "We need to resolve your river situation." My river situation? Yeah, residents have observed activities on the water that create liability exposure. I leaned on the splitter and said, "You mean me, fishing on my own land?" "And camping," she added like she had caught me running a meth lab. I had, in fact, camped there sometimes, not because I liked the house, I just liked it. There was a gravel bar on a bend where the sound of the water blocked out everything. I would bring a chair, a cooler, a little fire ring, and spend a night there now and then. It was quiet. That alone seemed to offend these people. She handed me a paper and said, "The board has voted to prohibit overnight occupancy on the river parcel." I looked at it, HOA resolution, stamped, signed, and completely worthless. "I'm gonna say this one more time," I told her. "You cannot vote rules onto my property." She smiled in that tight way people do when they are already imagining how great they will look winning an argument. "When your conduct impacts the neighborhood, yes we can." "No, HOA Karen, we can fine you." "No, HOA Karen, we can suspend river access." That one made me laugh. From me? She didn't like that. "You seem confused about how communities work." "Fishing and camping here is illegal. We will ban you from doing it." Me, "And you seem confused about county records and laws." Her face changed, not embarrassed, angry. She was not used to being corrected. "Fine," she said. "We will handle it formally." That phrase should have worried me more than it did. A little while later, I started hearing from a few homeowners who were normal people and clearly uncomfortable, and they would stop by the fence or catch me on the road and ask weird questions. "Do I need your permission to fish down there? Did you sell easements to the HOA? Are they really putting cameras by the stream?" At first I thought this was just gossip, and then one of them showed me a newsletter. The HOA had been charging river stewardship assessments, bank stabilization fees, and water safety patrol costs. The wording made it sound like the association owned and maintained the stream corridor as a community amenity, but obviously they did not. That was the point where this stopped being just a neighborhood irritation and became something else. They were not just bossy, they were collecting money and enforcing rules over land they had no right to control. I spent a few weekends pulling records and documents. I'm not a lawyer, but I do a lot of contract and title review in my work, so this kind of paper chase is not new to me. Essentially, it was all exactly what I thought it was. My parcel had been carved out before the subdivision restrictions attached, and the HOA owned the entrance landscaping, a small retention area, and a strip around the walking path. That was basically it. They did not own the stream, they didn't own the bed, and they didn't own the banks through my section. They didn't have a recorded easement over my camping spot either. And yet their newsletters and fee schedules treated all of it like HOA property. I then sent one more email. I attached the documents and wrote that the association needed to stop representing my land as a community asset and stop issuing notices to me and stop sending non-law enforcement personnel onto my property. I also wrote that if they continued, I would start reporting things to the right county officers and to homeowners who might want to know what they were paying for. The management company replied with one sentence, The board disagrees with your interpretation. That was it. No legal basis. No explanation. Just that. So I made up my mind. I was going to give them the easiest possible chance to back off, and if they didn't, I was gonna let them crash straight into the wall. I picked a weekend, loaded my truck, took my small tent and went down to the gravel bar. I parked on my side, carried my stuff down, set up my chair and built a contained little fire in my steel ring and started some coffee. I was not trying to hide. That was the point. Sure enough, before I even finished breakfast the next morning, one of the fake patrol squad guys came marching down the bank with a radio clipped to his shoulder, like he was raiding a cartel camp or something. "You were warned," he said. "Was I?" "Yeah, no overnight occupancy, no fires, pack it up." I held up my coffee and said, "No." He pulled out his phone and started taking pictures. "This will be documented as non-compliance." Great, get the water in the background. He didn't like that answer. He called somebody, and about 20 minutes later the HOA president arrived in a side-by-side utility cart followed by the management company rep in a crossover SUV parked up near the trail. She didn't even say hello, she just said, "You're banned from this area. Fishing and camping is illegal for you," she said. I was sitting in a folding chair with a fishing rod beside me and my boots off. "No, I'm not. We passed a resolution." "I know, it was adorable." Her mouth tightened. The management rep stepped in with that fake calm voice people use when they think paperwork makes them royalty. "Sir, the association has determined your use of this river frontage is creating a nuisance and safety risk. If you don't leave voluntarily, we will escalate." Then I asked, "Escalate to what?" The patrol guy answered before she could, "Trespass enforcement." That was the moment I knew they had learned absolutely nothing. I said, "Please do." The HOA president actually smirked at me. "You think you're the first difficult person we've dealt with, huh?" "No," I said, "but I may be the last." She told the patrol guy to call the sheriff, and yeah, 2 deputies came out. The HOA president talked first and loudly, of course. "This man has been repeatedly violating community rules, trespassing on restricted river property, building fires and refusing lawful orders to leave." One deputy turned to me, "Do you live here?" "Yeah." She pointed up the bank and said, "Not in the HOA." "That part is true," I said. The management rep handed over a folder. Inside were printed resolutions, violation notices and a nice map shaded to make it look like the HOA controlled the whole stream corridor. It was slick enough that I could see how it fooled some people. The deputy looked at me and said, "Do you have ownership documents?" "I do." I handed him copies I'd already prepared, just in case, and the HOA president leaned over and said, "Those are incomplete." The deputy kept reading and she tried again. "Our counsel reviewed this." He still kept reading, and then she made the mistake that ruined her ultimately. While he was looking at my survey, she turned and waved the patrol guy forward. "Go ahead, start breaking down the campsite," she said. "He's been given enough chances." I stood up so fast my chair tipped over. The deputy snapped, "Nobody's touching anything." The patrol guy froze. The other deputy looked at the HOA president and said very flatly, "Ma'am, if you direct someone to remove property from land you don't own, this is going to become your problem." You would think that would have been her stop sign. It was handed to her in perfect plain English. But instead she said, "This is our amenity corridor." I said, "Ask her what parcel number she thinks she owns." The first deputy did exactly that. She gave a broad answer about the river common area, and he asked again. "Parcel number?" She didn't know. The management rep jumped in with the folder, flipping papers too fast. That is when I saw what they had done. The internal map labeled my parcel as Community River Tract, not Adjacent Private Parcel, not Excluded Parcel. They had just renamed it. The deputy looked back at my survey, then at the county printout I had included, and he asked the HOA president, "Why are your people on this property?" And she said, "Because the association governs the river." "No," he said, "it appears it doesn't." For a second she genuinely looked shocked, not because she understood the law, but because she was not used to hearing no. The management rep tried one more move. "At a minimum," she said, "the association has safety authority due to fire risk." The deputy actually frowned at her. Private HOAs do not have public fire authority. That one hit the patrol guy too. He suddenly looked like he wanted to vanish into the trees. The president then pointed at my fire ring. "So he can just do whatever he wants?" I said, "On my land within county rules, yes." She threw up her hands. "This is insane." "No," I said, "this is recorded." The deputies told the patrol guy and the management rep to leave the riverbank, and they told the president that she needed to stop directing enforcement actions outside the association's actual property. And then one of them asked me quietly if I wanted a report number documented because of the threats to remove my belongings, and I said yes. So that was the beginning of the end. Most people would have taken the win there and gone back to fishing. And yeah, I did fish actually. I caught nothing, but the piece of sitting there while the HOA cart bounced back up the trail in defeat was honestly enough. For now. Still, I knew people like that don't learn from just embarrassment. They learn from paperwork, money, and public consequences, so I followed through. I filed a formal complaint with the county office, and I contacted several relevant state agencies to send the documents to. I also mailed a short, very plain letter to a handful of homeowners who had previously asked me for fishing permission. I included the parcel map and wrote that I believed the HOA had been collecting river-related fees and representing private land as a community-controlled amenity. And then I waited. The board made my job easier. Instead of backing off, they doubled down. They sent out an email blast to residents claiming an adjacent non-member owner was spreading misinfo and attempting to destabilize the community. They also announced increased patrol coverage along the river for resident safety, and that email got forwarded to me by 3 different homeowners within a day. A week later, someone from the patrol squad put a plastic sign near my trail entrance that said, "Authorized community access only." On my land. I took a picture, pulled it out of the ground and added it to the folder, and then things got funny. Residents started asking the board questions. Simple ones like, if the HOA owned the river, why wasn't it shown as common area in their closing packets? Why had one set of maps shown scenic access zone, while county records showed a private parcel? And why were river fees increasing if the patrol squad was just 2 guys in polos and an SUV? Why had the president told people they could report outsiders camping there when the supposed outsider had a deed to the property? The board responded the way weak people always do when their bluff starts failing. They got mean. One homeowner told me he asked for the recorded easement and got accused of being anti-community. Another said the president told him if he kept questioning the board, he could forget about getting approval for his deck extension. Somebody else got a violation notice over a kayak wreck 2 days after speaking up at a meeting. That kind of thing unites a neighborhood fast. Soon, I was getting copies of newsletters, budgets, and screenshots from their resident portal. The river fees were real, and so were the patrol expenses. So were riverbank rehabilitation charges for work done on land the HOA didn't even own. The deeper people looked, the worse it got. The management company bailed first, not publicly. They just sent a notice that they were ending services effective after a transition period, and that told me that they had looked under the hood and decided they didn't want their fingerprints on this. The board, especially the president, tried to act like this was just routine. "It is just a vendor change," she told people at the next meeting, and a homeowner replied, "Funny how the vendor change happened right after deputies told you to stop policing somebody else's property." That meeting, from what I was told, was chaos. People wanted books, they wanted contracts, and they wanted the River Patrol invoices, and they wanted to know why the board had been threatening non-members and why budgets referred to amenities the HOA apparently didn't even own. One homeowner who had been fined over a canoe wreck stood up and asked a beautiful question: if the river is private, were all those fines just made up? Apparently nobody on the board had a good answer for that one, and then the audit requests started landing. Residents demanded a special meeting, then a financial review, and then access to records, and somebody found that the patrol squad company was owned by the president's brother-in-law. Somebody else noticed the annual insurance binder described the stream access as an association-controlled common area, which meant they had likely been representing ownership or control to the insurer too, and that was when the real panic started. The president came to my house one last time. "I think this has gone on far enough," she said. I said, "I agree. It went far enough when you tried to ban me from my own river. We can work this out privately." "No." Her jaw tightened. "You have turned residents against the board." "No, you did that with fake authority and bad records." She took a deep breath. "If you stop contacting homeowners, I can recommend closing all open issues related to your property." I laughed in her face. "You still think you have open issues related to my property?" She looked offended, which at that point was almost funny. But then she tried the victim angle again. "Do you understand what this is doing to the neighborhood?" "Yeah," I said. "It's teaching them to read." And she laughed after that. A few days later, the residents held a special meeting without the board controlling the room the way they usually did. Proxies showed up, and so did a lot of anger. I didn't attend because I was not a member and had no reason to stand in the middle of their politics, but my phone lit up all night with updates from some people inside who were my friends. All in all, the board got recalled, not partially, entirely, and the management contract had already been terminated. The patrol squad agreement got cancelled on the spot, and then the new interim group brought in an outside accountant and a real HOA attorney, and the answer came back worse than anyone expected. The association had spent years acting beyond its recorded boundaries. It had billed members for maintenance and patrol tied to property it didn't even own. It had issued fines based on rules it couldn't enforce in those areas. It had exposed the HOA to refund claims, insurance problems, and possible misrepresentation tied to sales materials, and worse, once the new people stripped away the fake river amenity image, the remaining HOA had almost nothing real to justify its cost except the entrance landscaping and a tiny path strip. That led to the question nobody had seriously asked before: why are we even keeping this thing? The answer from a lot of homeowners was that they didn't want to. Once the board mythology died, the whole structure looked ridiculous. People were paying dues, fighting over paint shades, and funding fake patrol cops, mostly to preserve the idea that they lived in some elite river community. However, the river part, the thing the board loved using as a badge of control, had never been theirs to begin with, and without that it was just a nosy little association with overhead. So then the homeowners did what the old board never thought possible: they voted to wind it down. There were some practical steps, obviously. I mean, they had to deal with the entrance sign area, the path strip reserves, and cleanup of outstanding contracts, but the basic decision got made. There was no more HOA, no more board, no more management company sending threat notices about flower pots, no more patrol squad acting like mall cops in a nature preserve. The fallout to the former board was ugly. The president resigned before the recall vote was formally finalized, which didn't save her much. Residents wanted records, they wanted reimbursement reviews, they wanted to know who approved what and when, and the brother-in-law patrol contract became a whole thing on its own. I stayed out of most of that because I had no interest in becoming neighborhood gossip king. I had wanted one thing from the beginning, which is leave me alone and stop lying about my land. And yeah, I would say that is exactly what OP had gotten. And now we will read some comments from Reddit about the story. Comment number 1 said, "I will probably get downvoted for this, but I think there's a mild YTA buried in here. You were clearly in the right legally, and the HOA was way out of line, no argument there, but there's a difference between defending your property rights and methodically dismantling an entire HOA that most of the residents had nothing to do with. You went from leave me alone to mailing documents to homeowners and basically orchestrating the collapse of their community governance structure. A lot of those people bought homes expecting an HOA and may have wanted one, just not a corrupt one. You could have gotten a lawyer involved, sent a cease and desist, and maybe even pursued it through the county and still protected your land without nuking the whole thing. The camping trip felt less like someone exercising their rights and more like someone setting a trap they already knew the ending of. You're not wrong here, but I think you enjoyed this a lot more than someone who just wanted to be left alone would." And a second comment said, "NTA, and honestly this is one of the most satisfying outcomes I've read on here. You told them repeatedly, in writing, with documentation, that your property was not under their jurisdiction. They chose to ignore it. You didn't go looking for a fight, you just went camping on your own land. Everything that happened after that was a direct result of them refusing to accept a very basic legal reality." Furthermore, the fact that they were charging residents fees for river stewardship on land they didn't own is genuinely alarming, and the homeowners deserve to know about that. You didn't turn anyone against the board, you just gave people the information the board was actively hiding from them. The brother-in-law patrol contract is the cherry on top. These people were running a little empire built on nothing and got mad when someone pulled back the curtain. You gave them every chance to walk away and they kept escalating. That is on them. And yeah guys, thanks for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.